I'm leaving you another message. I know I keep leaving you messages, Andrew. I can't even reach Stephanie. I can't reach anybody. I'm seriously gonna lose it, I really am. I'm like trapped in here. Guess what? It's me again. I don't know if you're away with are you away with Catherine? I mean, where are you guys? Anyway, have you gone fishing? It's just like ever since she's been in your life, I can't fucking reach you anymore. I can't ever talk to you. You're just like always fucking on some holiday. Okay, I just left you like a 20-minute message and I got cut off. Andy, Marty, I don't even know who I'm leaving messages for. I'm just leaving messages now, you know what I mean? Ah!
Thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on The Wizard of Lies. Pretty incredible cast, pretty incredible project. Talk about your character. You are the more insecure, broken brother, I think. I felt, even going into before the everything started to collapse around Mr. Madoff.
Yeah, well, the two brothers had very different personalities. The younger brother somehow managed to extricate himself from the family in a way that the older brother didn't. Andrew had a girlfriend who kept encouraging him to start another business. And both Andrew and Mark were really into fishing. And Andrew started a fishing business, which I think saved him really from the same kind of torment that Mark had to endure. Mark was the older brother and felt that it was his responsibility to assume the mantle of his father, and his father never really endowed him with that feeling that he was equipped to run his company. And of course he was hiding everything that was going on with the money management business, which was two floors down from both the sons, in order to prevent them having any kind of liabilities associated with it if it ever went belly up. But the feeling from Mark was always that he didn't think he was man enough to take over.
And he was never treated as if he was man enough. If he put himself, we see scenes where he kind of puts himself out there in the hopes to receive the praise or the promotion to feel man enough, and he's never really given it.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting background to it, which is that Bernie really came from nothing and built his business up from nothing. And he felt...
And it maintained being nothing.
Yeah, well, in the end, it was nothing once again, which is not an unusual... I think, that's happened to Donald Trump a couple of times, too. But he resented his own sons, from what I understand, for having grown up with silver spoons in their mouths, which he had put there. But he always felt that they were privileged and that they didn't have to fight claw their way to some kind of success in their business, and that they were handed positions in his investment firm, and he resented them for it. He also loved them and was very affectionate toward them at times, but that kind of feeling that somehow they didn't have the same kind of nous, the same kind of mettle that he had, was a constant theme in the way that he talked to them. And Mark, in particular, being the older son and having idolized his father in a way that, was sort of heartbreaking. Like he never believed that he could, in a million years, that he could be as good as his father at what he did. And
I love that scene where you turn on the investigators who essentially don't know, who are accusing you of not knowing, or accusing you of hiding stuff, and you turn on them and say, how did you not know? You were supposed to be investigating.
Yeah, well, that was just, I think everybody felt that way. This guy was like, had actually started most of the watchdog organizations on Wall Street. The guy who was running all of these organizations that were meant to be overseeing, proper procedure for trading and everything was the one who was duping the system. So
how much
it's
is
no
the
surprise
dog actually going to watch
surprised.
when there's always food in the bowl, though?
Yeah, that's a good turn of phrase. Right?
I just came up with it. But I mean, that's true. If you develop the watchdog agencies and you're the one who's always sort of funneling the economy, I mean, he was funneling a huge portion of the economy.
Yeah, well, it's a classic, I mean, it's a classic fraud move, I guess, is to sort of set yourself up as somebody who is the most vigilant in terms of playing by the rules, and then is breaking the rules the whole time. So, it's no wonder that the SEC, who were at the time were apparently all young guys who were relatively inexperienced, were coming in to meet this guy who'd started NASDAQ, who'd started all these other watchdog agencies, and knew much more about how the markets worked than any of these guys did. And they were trying to sort of question his, business practices, and he kind of would humiliate them most of the time when they came to interview him.
What sort of research did you end up getting to do for your character? Were you able to talk to family members or friends? I'm not sure how open they are anymore to sort of stories being told about them.
I wasn't given any access to any of the family members. Unlike Bernie and Ruth, there's very little video footage of Mark. And I sort of trolled the internet for couple of months trying to come up with, even just an interview. Or there were interviews with Andrew after the Ponzi scheme, and after Mark had died. But there was nothing with Mark except there was a 20-second little home video that had been made. I don't even know if it was made by him. Somebody posted it on the internet, on YouTube, of him fishing on a fishing trip, and he was just there casting out and reeling in fish and talking to his buddies who were on the boat with him and holding up the fish that he caught. And when I first saw it, I thought that it was pretty, a pretty inadequate source material for me to base my whole character on. But,
so that's how he holds up a fish. This is how I feel like he'd take getting reamed out by his father.
But that's the funny thing, about acting is that that things that might seem insignificant can take on a much more significance just from repeated viewing. And I kept going back to it, it feels like some sort of investigative journalist thing, or a private dick or something, where they're just like watching again and again and again until they see that tiny little thing in the corner of the picture. And that really was what it felt like, where after watching it so many times, I started to notice little nuances about the way that he was and the way that he spoke to people, and the way, what his excitement was like in terms of catching this fish. And there was something about him that always seemed just a little bit sad, or a little bit meek, even though he had been endowed with all this wealth and power, and he was a handsome guy. And even in that one little video, just there was something about the way that he spoke that seemed to justify what was in the script, which was a series of conversations with a father who never sort of made him feel like he was a man.
I wondered about that when I was watching, because you do an incredible job of bringing this sort of weak nuance to the character that I don't think other actors would have really gone for. They would have sort of just let that play out in the script, but you kind of close your body in a little bit. He's a little bit softer than the other characters in the movie, and I was wondering how much of that did come from the script or came from this video that you saw, maybe holding up the fish and looking for attention and looking for someone to sort of say, "Hey, nice job."
Yeah, well, when I first read the script, and when Robert De Niro and I had first met to talk about it and everything, there was a feeling that he was a hothead, that he was like, I keep comparing him to, I keep comparing the description of him in the script to Sonny in the Godfather movies, where he was sounding off constantly, and that he was, didn't have any filter. And
really, you thought of Sonny?
Well, no, this was when I first read the script. There was a description of him, that he was a hothead. And Bob, when I first talked to him about it, he was like, "Yeah, he's a hothead," And I was like, "Okay, he's a hothead," And what does that mean, And I had heard anecdotal evidence of him coming into work some days and like laying into people at work and stuff. But then the more I started to dig deeper, it felt that he really was, somebody who didn't have a lot of confidence.
More of a Fredo.
Yeah,
To be honest. Like
yeah,
that was sort of,
yeah, absolutely. And that occasionally that might, explode in some kind of outburst because, out of frustration that he hasn't been able to feel like he's been heard, or that the people that are working under him, would treat him with the same authority that his father had. But
my kid brother, my kid brother's gonna take care of me. That kind of thing.
Yeah, like this idea that he somehow, wasn't in a position of authority, even though that was his role in that business. And so I saw these photographs of him as a young man, young boy, even with his family, and there's a lot of physical affection in the family, and a lot of kind of feeling of, a family unit. But he always had a kind of sad look on his face, or quite a serious look on his face. And so I just got the impression that, that those outbursts were some kind of like response to the feeling of inadequacy, or the feeling of just not, being in control. And that was obviously compounded by everything that happened after the Ponzi scheme. And of course, having idolized his father and then finding out that, that his whole life was built on a lie was, it just turned it to rage. And his suicide really, more than anything to me, was the only way that he could hurt his father. His first time he tried to commit suicide, he failed. And he left a suicide note saying, I don't know if I can say this on camera, but he said, "Fuck you, Bernie." So I think, it was the only way that he could hurt him.
After probably having finally recognizing that he had been hurt by him already for so many years, with or without the Ponzi scheme, he had been consistently sort of beat down emotionally by Bernie.
Yeah. I mean, that's what those scenes are in the movie, is like, him sort of making an attempt to kind of confront his father as an equal, as somebody who's now 40 years old and has had a lot of experience in Wall Street and in finance, and wanting to know the truth, wanting to know the answers about how to run the business, what's going to happen to you when you're done, and then Bernie just kind of smacking him like a puppy.
Oh yeah.
And then,
which it
and
seems
then
very
him hugging him like,
It seems very easy for De Niro to get there when as an actor when it comes to those explosions.
Yeah.
How much of that is him? He's so good at those scenes for some reason. Going back all the way in his career, I look at something like The King of Comedy, and his explosions in that movie are so specific and perfect. Yeah. How much does he improvise that? Because he's very good at it and always feels spontaneous.
Well, he's a powerful guy. He's a powerful presence. He's not somebody who feels that he needs to talk to fill up space. So
good for him. That's amazing.
It's a hard thing. You go to a party, you go to a dinner party, you sit next to people, and you feel like you got to ask them questions. They got you got to keep the ball rolling, and he doesn't feel that way. He just feels like he's going to sit there, and if somebody asks him a question, he'll answer it honestly. He's always himself, and that kind of feeling that he doesn't have that responsibility to, I don't know, make everybody like him all the time or something is very powerful. And on the set, he has that same authority, because he doesn't sit around having small talk in between scenes, and he's totally focused on his job, and then he goes. And so that, of course, played nicely into the scenes that we were acting, because you couldn't help but feel that kind of power emanating off of him. And that only just served me. I mean, the biggest thing I learned from watching him was that he never really came into scenes with a preconceived notion of how he was going to play things. Like, he would come in, he knew his lines impeccably, always, and I think he would memorize them weeks before the scenes so that they were no longer something that he had to think about. And then he was just totally present, and depending on what would happen in the scene, he would react in different ways, and sometimes he wouldn't react at all if nothing happened. And that feeling of like allowing the movie to come to you is one of the great lessons that I've had as an actor. And of course, like, your instinct as a young actor is to entertain and to grab people's attention. And he brings people attention to him by, allowing the scene to come to him.
Well, speaking of an actor who grabs people's attention, you were in a movie with Nicolas Cage, who gave what I think is one of the greatest performances in movie history. I'm talking about Face Off, and I'm talking about Castor Troy and your character Pollux Troy. So I'm going to ask you, what did you learn from Nick's performance and working with Nick in Face Off? Well, you also had a lot of scenes with Travolta maybe...
Yeah, not so many with Travolta.
Much. Yeah, they were mostly with Nick.
It was mostly with Nick.
God, it's been too long since I've seen that movie. I think it's only been a year.
Yeah, no, it's been, I won't tell you how many years it's been.
It's a regular watch for me.
I mean, look, here's the bottom line. Nick is, unlike anybody else, he's an eccentric person in the best sense of the word. He's totally unique, and he is, makes bold and big choices as an actor. And coming into that particular movie, which on the page may have read like a kind of, slightly preposterous sci-fi action movie. What Nick was bringing to it was his own outrageous personality, and he has a way of allowing that to show when he performs, and that's the hardest thing, is allowing what's really particular to you to show when you're performing. Because so much of the time you're trying to perform like somebody else. You've seen all these other people do certain types of scenes, and you think, oh, well, that's how I got to talk. That's how I got to, that's how I have to behave. That's how I have to move. That's how I have to hold my body. And he...
So is he similar to Castor Troy in between takes?
Well, he and I we'd met... when I got that job, I was trying to figure out, like, well, this guy's a sort of sociopath or whatever, and he's also got a brother who's a sociopath. So how do we figure out, like, a way to have both of us be completely insane, and for this to work as a story? And I had seen that Terry Zwigoff movie Crumb. That was a documentary about the cartoon artist Robert Crumb.
He's got the brother that pulls the noodle out, or the string out, right?
Yeah, no, he eats the string. Oh, yeah. Comes out the other end.
That's what I remember about that brother, is the shot of him sitting cross-legged and eating the string. And that
in lotus position or whatever. Yeah. But so I fixated on that family as a family of like a bunch of, and Charles Crumb as well, who was the one who wrote these journals, and the writing got smaller and smaller and smaller until like you could barely see it anymore, and then he killed himself. So I thought
just couldn't get any smaller.
I don't want to laugh about that, but it was a fascinating study of a family who all had that kind of extreme personalities, maybe personality disorders. And so I showed that movie to Nick at the time, and this was one of the first times that we'd met, and he, this was right up his alley. He's really interested in people who are living on the fringes of society and whose experiences are not the sort of everyday experiences of people that you meet. And he watched it. I remember him saying like, Alessandro, very dark. I like it. Woo! And we would hang out in his trailer, and basically decide that we were the two of them. We were like two Crumb brothers, and we would just improvise around the story of the movie, and just crack each other up. And I think we talked it like we put in, and then his assistant would write down everything that we said, and then we would send it to John Woo, and John Woo always seemed to love it. And to John Woo's credit, like he really wanted to allow the actors to bring, whatever kind of strange notions that we might have come up with. And I mean, there were weird stuff, and there was weird stuff in there. Like I remember there was some thing where we were in that prison scene where we were talking about like a sex sandwich or something. Like I was asking him why some other guy hated him so much in the prison, and he said, that he had a sex sandwich with his wife and his sisters.
Remember that, yeah.
And Woo, like John Woo called us in to have a meeting with him about the script, and he said, sex sandwich. Very funny. And he put it in, and he kept it in. It's in the movie, I think. So that was, that was actually maybe the opposite experience of the De Niro thing, where I felt like Nick just gave me the license to just, try anything, like as extravagant as it might be, and as outrageous as it might be, that, there might be a place for that, at least in this kind of a movie.
Did you feel any of that kind of freedom on a film that was released last year that I love, the Nicholas Winding Refn film, The Neon Demon, which it seems to me he allows a kind of sense of that. While he has a very, I think, strict tone and aesthetic, there is a sense with the performances that you are allowed to be a bit bigger and a bit more free in your choices.
That performance was just okay. Yeah. So that movie he had asked me to be in. I couldn't. He only shoots chronologically, and I was doing The Elephant Man with Bradley Cooper at that time, and I think the play had transferred from Broadway to London, and so I had like 3 weeks, I think, in between the Broadway run and the London run, and he said, I want you to be in this movie. I wanted to do this role, and and the way it was boarded because of the chronology of the movie, there was like 2 days of shooting that would conflict with my play schedule. And I said, I want to do it. Let's do it. And he said, well, yeah, but there are 2 days that conflict with your play schedule, so you can't do it. And I was like, well, can't you like move those 2 days somewhere else? No, I can't do it. So.
Wow.
So then he was like, but I want you to be in the movie. And I said, well, okay, I have these 3 weeks free. So he wrote a part for me that was only going to play in the middle of the film. And those 3 weeks were the 3 weeks that I was available to shoot. And they were the 3 weeks that was going to be, in the schedule of the film shoot where that character would play.
That's incredible. That sounds like someone to me who knows they work best like with restrictions, if that makes sense,
Yeah. I don't know what kinds of restrictions he has, but in that case, he definitely wanted to sort of figure out some way that we could work together, and so he wrote this role that was based on Tom Ford, and. I'm a huge fan of Tom Ford and his clothes and all of that. But Nick was amused just by the sort of incredible confidence that Tom Ford had, and he was fascinated by the fact that Tom Ford had once wanted to be an actor, and so he decided he wanted to put into the movie a scene where this fashion designer was talking about having been an actor and, having like decided that that wasn't for him, and that he was going to move on to something else, and that he was a creative beast or whatever, and that it was it didn't matter how he expressed himself, and at that time he would express himself as an actor, and now he was expressing himself through making clothes, and so I basically just watched all these interviews with Tom Ford, and that was the basis of my.
Did Tom Ford know that?
I have no idea. I've never met him.
I think that film is beautiful and crazy and weird. Do you get it?
I mean, the whole enjoyment of that performance came from this flower that I made out of a handkerchief that I had. It was a prop that was given to me in the first scene in the movie that I had in the movie. That was like this beautiful handkerchief, and it was white, and it had like a little black rim around it. And I sort of thought, like, well, this is somebody who's like thinks and feels that he's always creating, and so why not, in every scene be creating something? And so I had this like piece of handkerchief, and I decided I was going to fashion it into a rose, and that's all I did that whole scene. Meanwhile, like there were women who were getting like half naked in front of me in this humiliating way, who were auditioning for some fashion role, and I was paying no attention to them, but just fixated on this like sort of new thing that I'd made, and that was my performance.
You and your lovely wife Emily have a production company, and you produced this great show called Doll and M that was on HBO for a couple seasons. I think it was on BBC or in the UK and on HBO, right?
Yeah, it started out with Azazel Jacobs, who's a great independent film director who we had known from living in Echo Park in LA. And we'd all been sitting around together and talking about, wouldn't it be funny if we wrote a play about two women, one who was like a movie star and one who was, her best friend who was really down on her luck, and the movie star would hire her as her like assistant or something.
It's actually something that happens, I think, quite often in LA, right?
Yeah, and there's a weird relationship between actors and actresses and their assistants where they become kind of their best friend, but there's also this weird hierarchy to the relationship, and so we wanted to kind of like mine the kind of strangeness of that and the humor of that. And we were going to make it as a play first, and then they thought, well, we'll make it as an independent film. And Azza and his DP got together with us, and over a weekend we shot 20 minutes of footage just for fun, for nothing. I mean, we did it. It may have cost us a couple $100 or something. And he cut it together, and it was totally brilliant. And I went around raising money for a indie feature, and we had we were halfway to raising the money to make it as a little indie movie. And then we were in England over the summer, and and Dolly Wells went into B-Sky B and just sort of mentioned that we were doing this thing, and they got all sort of curious about it. And it had been loosely based on, the germ of the idea came from Steve Coogan and Michael Winterbottom's The Trip. And we had all loved that, and so the idea of them kind of playing on their own identities and playing versions of themselves that were kind of ghoulish and weird and funny seemed like how we wanted to do it. And Lucy Lumsden was the executive who had commissioned The Trip at the BBC, and she'd since moved to B-Sky B. And she saw our clip and overnight just said, we'll commission the whole thing. So we ended up making it for British television and then selling it back to HBO, which doesn't happen now.
Was this the first thing that you guys produced as a partnership? Because I know now you're in the midst of producing other projects as well.
Yeah, that was the genesis of our little company, which now we have a show at Amazon that we're developing and a show at True TV, and we're making an independent feature, and so yeah, the company's expanded since then, but that was the beginning of it.
That's fantastic. Let's get some questions from the audience. Who's right there?
Hey, Alessandro. I saw that you won Best Actor at Tribeca Film Festival for 1% More Human, so congrats. And
Thank you.
And you were also one of the jurors for some of the foreign films, I guess. How was it like? How was the film festival like for you?
This was I was on the foreign film jury. So I was me, Willem Dafoe, Peter Fonda, Ruth Wilson, and Terry Gevison were on the foreign film jury. And I've done this a couple of times at other film festivals. It's always a great thing to do because, initially it seems like, oh my God, I got to watch like 5 movies a day for a week, and it seems overwhelming. And then as you get into it, you just start discovering all these incredible filmmakers, and even movies that don't quite work are kind of fascinating. And you get kind of your love of movies gets fueled by it. And so we'd had a great week doing that. And but my wife was away filming in London, and I just hadn't seen our kids at all. And when it came to this awards ceremony, they asked which of the jurors were going to go and present the award for the best foreign film and everything. And everybody had to go out of town except Willem Dafoe. And he was like, you can't make me do this alone, And I was like, I haven't seen my kids in a week. And so he kind of coerced me into going with him to announce this award. And we announced the Foreign Film Awards. And then we were sitting backstage, and I was, we had our feet up drinking a beer, and the organizers came and told us that we had to watch the end of the ceremony in the auditorium. And we were like, what do you mean we have to watch the end of the ceremony? We're like, we've done our bit. We presented our awards. And then they like physically pushed us into the auditorium. And we were sitting back there like 2 kind of grumpy teenagers with our feet up on the seats in front of us and saying like, God, they treat us with no respect, you know what I mean? Don't they know who we are, And then suddenly, he's like smacks me and he says, "You won, man!" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I had no idea that I was even eligible for an award or anything. And apparently they'd been like this, presenting this. Josh Lucas was up on stage presenting the award for the best actor, and it was me. And I of course, the only time I ever won anything, I had nothing prepared to say, and I had to make my way up there and give a speech in front of all these people. I think it was very embarrassing things I said. And, because of course the times that you're nominated for I was nominated for a Tony, and I which I didn't win. And in fact, and I had a big long speech prepared, like, my mom and my dad and my wife and my kids and my agents, my publicist, and everybody, and that, of course, I didn't win. And there was when you're nominated for an award, they bring a camera right up close to your face to get your reaction when you lose, and for some reason there was no camera like anywhere near me. So I thought, okay, well, I definitely didn't win, even before they announced it. And then when the other guy won, I was there with my mom, and I went something like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like totally pissed off and everything because there was no camera there. I felt like I was safe. And it turned out there was like a crane, like the one that's in here, like way far away on a long lens that was right close to me. Just saw this look of disgust, and people kept saying, "Man, you were really ungracious about that award when you won it."
Next question.
Hi. So you've had you've played a really diverse roles, and I'm wondering what attracts you to a script now versus when you first started?
Well, I have a very easy answer to that, which is that the director is what attracts me to a script now, and the role was what attracted me to a script all through the sort of beginning of my career, for far too long a time into my career, I guess.
What changed that, doing a number of movies or a few movies where the role seemed like it was going to end up being one thing, and then you saw a cut and the director's vision wasn't exactly what was told to you initially?
Movies belong to directors. That's just the bottom line. And I feel like that's the Achilles heel of television, despite all of the ways that television is becoming in some ways more relevant than movies. TV should belong to directors as well. Directors are the ones who are telling the story, who have a particular visual style in mind. Everything needs to come back to the director. And I didn't really understand that when I was younger. I thought the most important thing was that I got to strut my stuff somehow, and that I got to show off, my chops or whatever. And I just did movie after movie after movie where I was getting off on, the process of playing a role or whatever, and it wasn't in aid of anything. And if it's not in aid of anything, who gives a shit? I mean, it really doesn't matter, and it doesn't last, and nobody sees it, and it's totally insignificant. And whereas if there's a great director, even things that you do that may not be by design or may not be something that you had, were excited about to kind of show off with as an actor, might land a bigger impact than things that you had planned, and that's always the goal, is to find things that are that happen by surprise. And Barry is a perfect example. I mean, I think the clip that they showed earlier on just today on this show was a scene that had not been in the script, that Barry decided to shoot on a day that he'd finished filming early with me in my apartment, and there was nothing left to shoot. We were sitting around twiddling our thumbs, and we had read somewhere that Mark had made, as he was spiraling down, looking at the internet and finding all these articles about how the media and the public were convinced that they were guilty, started sending them to his brother and his lawyer, and then calling them up over and over and over again, to the point where they stopped taking his phone calls, and it would just go to voicemail, and he would call them and hang up and call them and yell at them and then call at them and apologize and call and have actually quite lucid sort of message that he'd leave, and then another furious one. And so Barry set up a camera in the kitchen there and told me to improvise a bunch of phone calls for an hour, and then that became the scene that was the sort of penultimate scene before I hang myself. And without it, I don't think the performance would have made any sense. And those are things that great directors are inspired by and come up with on the fly. And it's all about finding the people who have a unique way of looking at the world, who are highly intelligent, who have a story that they absolutely have to tell, and have that kind of creative drive, who have a little bit of arrogance and a kind of self-confidence that could be maybe a little off-putting, but these are qualities that not everybody has, and without them, your performance is worthless.
I think we have time for one more question right there.
Hi, yeah. So I was just wondering, in terms of The Wizard of Lies, because it's a subject matter, or it's about a subject matter that has a lot of gravity attached to it, if being in this movie provided any additional insight into the real world impact that this actually had.
Well, I mean, the movie was really using the family tragedy as, a paradigm for the way that this Ponzi scheme had affected people all over the world. But Barry's real focus was on this family and, telling a family drama in a way that would hurt. And that by seeing the way that hurt, you would understand that this was just the germ, the seed of the way that this spidered out into, people of all different socioeconomic backgrounds and everything.
Great montage that's that turns into a Chuck Close painting
of his face,
yeah,
with all the victims. Yeah. But, if your question is do I understand Bernie better? Do I understand the impact of the thing better? I mean, I think part of the point of the film is that there is no getting to the bottom of a man like Bernie Madoff, because this is somebody who is full of paradoxes. He was incredibly loving of his family. He was incredibly protective of his family, and yet he destroyed his family to the point of like literally driving his son to suicide. And it's arguable whether Andrew's cancer was kind of, brought on in some way by the stress of the experience. That there was like a sort of carnage in his wake. He was, both almost affectless and yet incredibly magnetic and powerful. He, at every turn there are paradoxes in his personality, and with people like all the great fraudsters are able to compartmentalize their lives in a way that is baffling. You can't imagine that they could have a sleepless night, knowing what at any moment could happen when they woke up, and yet he could. So the movie really set out to kind of just create this portrait of him and his family, and the way that a man like that, what the effect of that would be on the people that he really loved and who really loved him.
The Wizard of Lies is it's this weekend, right? At 8 p.m.
I think it's Saturday, right? Saturday
night.
20th.
Yeah.
Is it
the
written on
20th.
there?
Right. It's right there on the
20th, 8
poster.
p.m. It's hidden behind my mug.
Alessandro,
behind my
thanks so much for
build
talking
mug.
to me, man. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for
great
being
pleasure.
here. The Wizard of Lies, guys. Thanks, man.
Thanks.